So welcome everyone. My name's Adrienne Bryant Godwin. I am the Director of Programming for the College of Visual and Performing Arts, and I am here with my colleague Ryan Brayton, who is the Associate Director of Development for the College of Visual and Performing Arts. We're so glad to have you here. We love any chance that we can get to connect with our alumni, even if it's online distance and we can't see your faces. We're still happy to be here with you, especially when it is about the opportunity to potentially give you some money. So the goal of tonight's info session is twofold. We want to kind of go through the application process for this particular opportunity, the Young Alumni Commissioning Project. But also we want to give some general guidelines and best practices for grant writing in general. This is something that we know many of our alums are having to do either for their own work or on behalf of an organization that they work with. And we want to use this as kind of a working opportunity, not only to review your applications, but also hopefully for you to grow as grant writers. And I certainly have a lot of experience grant writing in my career, and Ryan, my wonderful colleague, is an expert. So I hope over the next hour we're able to get the conversation started, but please know that we are available to you as resources always as part of the CVPA family. So a couple of housekeeping items. We are doing this online info session both for those of you who have joined us live, but also for anyone else that is applying to this grant who can't participate tonight. So we are going to be recording this session and it will be uploaded onto the website in a couple of days. So if you have any questions and you don't feel like emailing us, you want to check back on the video, it will be uploaded there. And actually, Haley Smizer is our programming and engagement manager. She is running the show, quote unquote, behind the scenes. And she is also managing this project. Haley, if you could drop in the chat the link for the Young Alumni Commissioning homepage where they will be able to find that video, that would be great. Thank you so much. Before we get started, we'll be together for about an hour tonight, and I would love to have a better idea about who is here with us. So if you are interested, please let us know your name, what year you graduated, what department or school you graduated from, and maybe where you're tuning in from. This might help us tailor our conversation to your specific needs. So, and we just love to know who we're talking to. In terms of questions, I encourage you all, we want this to be informal, even though we're separated by the interwebs. So please feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation. We'll stop and answer them. And then we will also have a dedicated time at the end of the session for questions as well. So with that said, I think we should probably get started. I guess let's give some brief introductions. Ryan, do you want to introduce yourself to the group?
Sure. So I'm Ryan Brayton. As Adrian mentioned, I am on the staff of the College of Visual and Performing Arts. I work on the development team, and I focus on submitting grant proposals for our faculty across all our visual and performing art departments, as well as the Center for the Arts. And then I also focus on alumni relations. I really enjoy working with artists, and writing grants is, when you're an artist, the business arm of being an artist, that's a whole other art form, and it combines elements of storytelling and accounting, and it's a process I really enjoy. So I'm really excited to work on this project.
Thanks, Ryan. And as I mentioned, I'm Adrienne Bryant Godwin, Director of Programming for the college. What that means is that I have a couple of different responsibilities. My main responsibility is curating the performance series in both the Center for the Arts in Fairfax and also at our venue in Manassas, the Hilton Performing Arts Center. In addition to that, I work on a lot of projects that don't happen on the stage, and what we call our engagement work. And I work very closely with Haley on this work. This is scheduling artist visits when they are on campus or in our community, creating the schedule of who they're going to interact with, what their activities are going to be. We've really expanded a lot of this work, probably since some of you were here. I got here a couple of years ago. And that's really, really rewarding. I also get to work on fun special projects like this, the Young Alumni Commissioning Project. And I also get to do a lot of fundraising. So Ryan and I work closely together often. Whenever I have a big idea that's going to be a big, expensive idea, I get to come to Ryan and he helps me bring it to fruition. So background is in dance. Grew up as a dancer and realized, shortly after arriving in college that my strengths were really on the producing and business side of the world. But I've had the great pleasure of being able to work with performing artists from many, many genres and love this particular project because I get to read so many wonderful creative proposals. So let's get started. Brief history of the project, the Young Alumni Commissioning Project. We are in our third year already. We started this program because we had a bequest from a very generous donor, Linda Gramlich, 3 years ago, who wanted to support young artists at the Center for the Arts. And so we devised this program because we knew that those first couple of years after you graduate are really difficult, especially if you haven't done a lot of maybe professional work yet, either or if you haven't gotten any grants. Sometimes it's really hard to get that first grant, and so we wanted to create an opportunity, as I mentioned, for you to hone your skills as a grant writer, but also to, find those projects, so those exciting projects that our alums are working on that we think are particularly special and are particularly set up to a point where they can make a difference in our alums' lives. And we love this opportunity because we are able to stay connected to our alums in a very direct, creative way. So, we've learned a lot about this project in the past couple of years, and we kind of fine tune it every single year. And of course, COVID has put some halt in many of our plans, but we're excited to soldier on with this. So we've had recipients of this award from many of our 7 disciplines. I was looking back on the winners, and they've come from photography, film, theater, dance, and music so far. Most of you might know we have 7 schools and departments in CVPA. All of them are eligible to apply for this grant, alums from each of those departments, including arts management. And so Haley, I'm going to ask you to drop in the chat again that link so that you all can look at some of the past winners. I always think when I'm applying for a grant, it's a great idea to take a look at who has already won grant funding to see what the organization or the entity is interested in supporting. So with that, we'll talk a little bit about eligibility, kind of the basics of this grant. So if you would like to apply, you have to be a graduate of CVPA from 2010 or after. That can be an undergraduate program, that can be a graduate program, certificate holder, double majors, minors. We're pretty liberal with that definition. We do allow collaborative teams. We love it when we see many people that are coming together to produce a project. We just need one member of the team to be a CVPA alum. So it doesn't have to be everyone on the team, just one member. And we do ask that that one individual member is the lead applicant on that is sending us the application. This is a question that comes up a lot, which is whether or not Mason staff can apply. The answer is yes, but they have and they can apply even if they're currently enrolled in a degree program. So you can be a staff member, but as long as you've already completed your undergrad or already completed your graduate work, you are eligible to apply. Are there any questions about eligibility? All right, we'll keep moving then. Next is the fun stuff. So money, funding amounts, how much we are offering. In prior years, we have awarded essentially two different funding levels. The first is a $5,000 level. This is what we call the Young Alumni Commissioning Project Award. And then we have also awarded two awards at the $2,500 level, which these are called the Young Alumni Creative Development Awards. Even though in the past 2 years, they have both followed that model of one $5,000 grant and two $2,500 grants. That's not to say that in this year's pool, if we see 4 applications that we really want to support, we might give out 4 awards. If we see only 3 that we really want to support, we'll only give out 3. So we don't really constrict ourselves in that way, but we do tend to really only give them out at those 2 different levels, 5,000 and 2,500. In terms of the type of work that we are looking to support, if you're following along on the application, we're looking for original new work. It can be in any art form or multidisciplinary art forms. It needs to be suitable for performance or screening or exhibition in a Mason venue. That's kind of like, that's the crux of what we're supporting. Original new work can absolutely be an adaptation of a work that existed previously, as long as there's an original take on it. This can be dance, this can be photography, and in terms of, it can be, as I said, any art form. You get to determine the size, how long the program is, what the scope is, what the actual content is. We're not issuing any sort of, we need each of these projects to be inspired by this. It's really 100% up to your discretion. And in terms of the venue, we are focused mostly on more traditional venues at Mason. So whether that is in our gallery spaces or in our performance spaces, the Harris Theater or theater space or the concert hall, any of those are eligible. But we're also open to non-traditional. If you wanted to do an outside performance, if you wanted to do a performance in the Johnson Center, we're open to working with applicants whose applications rise to the top to try to figure out what the best fit is for your work. For this application round, we are looking for works that can be presented in the 2021-2022 season. So that is roughly September 2021 through May of 2022. With that said, we are now in the business of flexibility all the time and shifting plans and canceling things and rescheduling. COVID has, unfortunately made us postpone a lot of our past recipients' presentations, and we're just in constant communication with them. Again, we want to work with you to determine the best way to showcase your work to the public. So if it needs to be outside of this upcoming academic calendar, that's fine. We'll work with you to make it happen, because we don't know when we will necessarily be able to be in our spaces at full capacity. So we'll work with you on that. In terms of whether the program needs to be fully produced, or if it can be a work in progress, that's really up to you. $5,000 or $2,500, that can mean very different things to different projects, right? And so if that only gets you to a work in progress showing, that's okay. If that can get you to a fully produced evening length production, great, that's okay. There's no requirement for us in terms of what we're looking for applications. I see a question from Jazz Anarchy, about where to see the previous awardees project. So Haley had posted a link, and if you click on that link and scroll down a little bit, you will see a list of the 2019 awardees and a list of the 2020 awardees. Let us know if you can't find that still, though. Any questions on scope of work, the type of projects that we are looking to support? All right. The music, you're looking for the music. So we have only had, so within the links that you see, the ones that have been completed, which so far is only one photography exhibit, has more information on that specific project. Most of the projects so far, the actual public presentation has had to be delayed because of COVID. So it might be more of a general project description. We don't have like their proposals online or anything. I want to move into evaluation criteria now. We're going to talk about evaluation criteria before we get into the specifics of the application, because I think it's important for you to know the metrics that we're using in terms of how we're looking at your applications. As we go through this, I'm going to talk about kind of the evaluation criteria in general, and then Ryan is going to go into a little bit more detail of how to highlight your project in context of the evaluation criteria, a little bit more generally. So there's 3 criteria that we use. The first is artistic excellence. And what we use to determine artistic excellence is really your project summary and your work sample. And again, we'll go over both of those a little bit later. But what we're looking for is there a strong creative vision behind this project? Is the idea, is it original? Is it creative? Is it something that we've never seen before? Is it intriguing to the panel? And Ryan can talk a little bit about ways that you can convey that in your project summary. We're also, the work samples are allowing us to see through your past work, what are your technical skills strong, whatever that means in your particular genre. What's your level of creativity? Are you kind of doing things that people have maybe done before? Are you trying something new? Or if you're doing something that people have done before, are you really, really impressive in terms of your technical skill? So artistic excellence is, it's kind of a nebulous concept that can mean a lot of different things. There's not a cut and dry, way to really measure artistic excellence. So when the panel meets to look at these applications, there's a lot of really interesting conversations that happen as they discuss each of the applications. And I'll talk a little bit about the panelists makeup later. But Ryan, do you want to add anything?
Sure. So as Mason graduates in your respective art forms, you're well qualified to define what high quality means in your respective art forms. When thinking about the creative team you're working with, you'll want to cite more facts than you will adjectives. So you'll want to think about, for example, in theater, you'll want to think about the caliber of production credits they've done before with theaters. Has your creative team worked at? Have they received any accolades, any positive reviews? So you'll want to back up your um, creative, the caliber of your creative team with heavy on the facts.
Thank you. I see a question in the Q&A from Michaela. This looks like a very specific question about rights. I'm going to answer this when we talk about budget, if you're okay with this holding off, because we will cover this. So the next evaluation criteria that we're going to go over is potential impact on the artist's career. So we want to make sure that the projects that we are supporting are really going to matter to you where you are in your career right now. Again, that can mean a lot of different things, and it's up to you to kind of make the case in your project summary of how important this money would be right now in 2021, where you are in your artistic trajectory. So again, we're looking at your project summary to glean this information, your creative team bios. We want to see, will the funding that you would get, is it going to make an impact in your project? So, you know, if your project budget is $300,000, it's probably not going to be, but let's say it's $300,000. Is $5,000 really going to make that big of a difference? Maybe not. If your project budget, you know, is $10,000, is $7,500, this is going to go a long way to really make something happen that you probably couldn't do otherwise. So, so we take that into account. We also take into account how this project is going to advance your own artistic goals. Is this going to help you grow as an artist? Is this going to help you try out something new that you wouldn't be able to try out if you didn't have this funding? So Ryan, you want to add anything there?
Sure, yeah. So, you know, thinking about this in the context of outcomes and next steps in your career, will you be able to use this opportunity to invite key people to come see this work? So if you're in theater, is there an artistic director of a theater that you are a casting director that you would invite to see your work? And perhaps you could advocate for yourself to, you know, perform at the next level. Are there any sort of, you know, digital files that you would take away to use in your application for a film festival or any sort of opportunity like that? And also, you know, just a general resume booster as well. It's always important.
Great. And then the last criteria is feasibility of project completion. So kind of similar to the last example that I gave. If you've just graduated and you come to us with a proposal that is $300,000, you don't have any other money committed, and you've never pulled off something of this large scope, we might have questions about, you know, whether this is the right time to support a project that is so much bigger than what you maybe have accomplished in the past. A couple of tools that we're going to use to determine feasibility. We're going to look at your project summary again to make sure that it is well thought out, that it's well written, that you have a clear and concise artistic vision that you can communicate both to us and to anyone else that you might be trying to fundraise from. We're going to look at your creative team bio to make sure that you're arming yourself with the right team to complete the project, if it's necessary to have additional individuals working with you. We're going to look at your budget. Is your budget realistic? Is it including numbers that don't really seem to align with industry standards? Is it comprehensive? Have you really thought through everything that you're going to need to spend to make this project happen, to make it come to life? And do you have a track record of successfully producing work in the past? If you do, that's great. And again, your bio can help to tell us that. But if you haven't ever done anything, that's okay too. We're not, again, like, we want to have this grant be a springboard, for artists' work if that's appropriate in that time of their career. But you need to convince us that it's the right opportunity to support you and that you're ready for that growth opportunity. Ryan, you want to add anything?
Sure. So just, be mindful that this project is logistically possible. At Mason, the sky is the limit. Anything is possible at Mason, but if you're going to propose a concept that involves 30 musicians, do you have experience promoting audition opportunities for a full orchestra and conducting auditions and contracting musicians? And, if there's cannons and waterfalls going off in Harris Theater, have you gotten all the permits? Have you checked with fire and safety to make sure that's feasible? Have you confirmed that you have access to all the resources you need to meet the artistic excellence that you'll, of course, state in this proposal? And are all these steps included in your timeline, which is part of the proposal? And then any expenses, like Adrian mentioned, outside of the amount you're asking, do you have a way to meet those budgetary goals? And if you are going to be doing any outside fundraising, you'll want to cite that. And if you're going to be doing crowdfunding, do you yourself have experience crowdfunding? Are you going to hire somebody that is a crowdfunding consultant that has experience? So just making sure that all the pieces are tied together and that everything is realistic.
Great. So that's the evaluation criteria. Any questions on those? Again, as you are creating your application, if you have questions on any of this, you can reach out to Haley, and we'll have her contact information at the end. It's also on the website, and we're here to kind of talk through scenarios with you. If you want to come to us and say, I have this idea, I don't know if it's the right fit, we're here to be a sounding board and kind of and give you our best judgment of that. So I wanted to talk about who's going to be actually reviewing the applications and what that process is. So we pulled together a panel of 7 individuals from across the college. We have representation from each of the departments or schools, 1 faculty member from each of them. And just as a reminder, that's dance, music, theater, film, visual art, game design, and arts management. And we'll talk a little bit later, but I think it's important for you to realize or to remember as you're drafting your proposals that you're not, if you're a choreographer, for example, you are not submitting this application to be reviewed by a panel of dance experts. There will be 1 dance expert on the panel, but the others might have very little familiarity with the dance world. And so you need to think about that as you're choosing your wording and as you're choosing the level of explanation that's provided. So each of will meet as a group, each of the 7 representatives and myself, we go through each application. We do not work on a consensus model. So everyone scores each application individually. And then we take a look at what the overall scores were when they have been combined. And then recommendations are proposed to Rick Davis, our dean, and Rick is the one that ultimately makes the decision. I will say that everyone who applies is eligible to receive feedback on their application. I highly, highly recommend that you take advantage of this. Even I know, when you don't get a grant, it's obviously, it's really disappointing. You've put in a lot of work into it. But I encourage you to hear. I will say, like, I have learned so much from panelist feedback over the years. Ryan, I'm sure you probably agree with me. I always take advantage of every single opportunity to hear their feedback, because you hearing how other people are viewing your idea, both the idea as itself, but also as you are presenting the idea, is incredibly valuable. And it will also help you if you choose to apply again, in future years. So Ryan, I don't know if you have any thoughts you want to share on that.
Yes, feedback is very, very valuable, and I've had experiences where we've been rejected and we've gotten feedback, and we were able to tighten up our subsequent applications and be awarded funding. So that's going forward, you will hopefully apply to many more grants, and it's hyper competitive out there right now with many, many applications, and a lot of program officers unfortunately just don't have the time to provide that level of feedback. So it's a wonderful opportunity that I strongly encourage you to take advantage of.
Yeah, it stings a little bit, but
Yeah.
it's good. Everyone, no one is going to get every single grant they apply to. So it's probably good to get used to, not receiving the grant and learning from it, because it will happen the more you do them. So, okay, I'm going to keep us moving, and I want to dive into the actual application now. Haley, can you drop in the chat the web form, and so that people can follow along? And then I'm sure most of you have probably seen this web form. If you scroll down, it says download a copy of the application that's hyperlinked, and that gives you kind of the general RFP, but the web form, this is the first step in the application process. So we'll start with the project summary, which is the meat of the application. What we're looking for in this, oh, sorry, Ryan, we were going to talk about your general grant writing tips. I'm sorry, and I
It's okay.
in. Okay, why don't we do project summary, and then we'll come back to the general.
Sounds good.
How was that? Sorry, I just
Project
got so excited. Got so excited about talking about the project summary. So what we're looking for here, we're looking for what is your overall concept, creation timeline. So we want to see, like, is this a 5-year project? Probably not, because we asked for it to be premiered or showcased within the next year. But what's the timeline? This is where you tell us how these funds could impact your career, and how, bringing this project to fruition could impact your career. This is where you should remember that you're going to be speaking to people that are not necessarily experts in your field. But this is, it's 2 to 3 paragraphs. Paragraphs can be long, so this could be a good page, a little over a page. But this is your kind of your one shot to tell the panel, what your exciting idea is, and how you're going to make it happen. So Ryan, I'll kick it over to you.
Yeah, so this section is where you will essentially write the who, what, when, where, why, and how, and you'll want to quantify as much as possible. So this is where you'll talk about your art form, if you're going to do, if it's a gallery show, the number of pieces, the type of your medium, if it's a play, the length of the play, a film piece, the duration of the film. How would be your production requirements? So if you're thinking of a theater piece, you'll want to talk about all the production components of that, with the lighting and technical components. And then as an artist, this gets into impact on your career trajectory. Why are you presenting this work, and how will it advance your career? So why now? Why this piece? I'll jump back here to the the general writing tips. So as I said earlier, that we all have a calling to be an artist, but the grant writing, in my opinion, is a whole other art form. And like I said, it combines elements of storytelling and accounting and persuasive essay writing, all while being very concise. So I outlined 5 of the main pointers that I recommend. And the first kind of goes without saying, and that's read the directions and follow the instructions thoroughly. You have to put yourself in the shoes of the review panelists, because they're having to digest a lot of information. If you're going to be assigned to write, 500 words max, and then you go over, then it's going to put yourself in an awkward spot, because then the panelists are going to have to compare someone who didn't follow the directions and went over versus somebody who did. So you don't want to be in that situation. Use very simple, clear writing, free of jargon. So write in the active tense. So you'll want to say, for example, we will produce a play, as opposed to a play will be produced. It flows better when it's in the active tense. There's, in normal times, when the review panel would meet in person with lots of paper, make sure to put your name and the page number on every page, in case the panelists want to exchange pages back and forth. I'm very sure this is all going to be done virtually, but in normal times, I've served on a panel myself when there's a lot of paper flying back and forth, and it's helpful so your proposal doesn't get lost or out of order. Use more facts than adjectives. So this is something you'll want to be mindful of, especially with your creative team. So talk about your creative team members, their accolades, their accomplishments in terms of degrees and any awards they've received, and so forth. Understand your audience. So as Adrienne mentioned, all of the review panelists are professors in the College of Visual and Performing Arts. So they're university professors. They're very aware of everything going on in the world. And so if your project, for example, focuses on some issue that we would all have knowledge of, be mindful of the real estate that you have on the page, and don't spend a lot of time explaining something that the panelists probably all have knowledge of. And then lastly, the last one is to start with the end in mind. And so that's framing all your writing in the context of the evaluation criteria, and make things pop in terms of the evaluation criteria. So I teach a class in the fall, for example, and we all take our evaluations at the end of the semester. We've all evaluated our professors, and there's 6 things that I'm evaluated on, one of which is responds to email promptly, and that is not my strength normally. And so I make sure when I'm teaching, I always respond as fast as I can to students, because I know that's how I'm going to be evaluated. So start with the end in mind. And let's see, that takes us, we pause for questions on project summary?
Yeah, any questions on the project summary? By the way, Ryan, you always respond to my emails very quickly. So.
I try my
best. All right, seeing no questions here, we'll move on to creative team. So creative team, this is where you're going to share the bios of kind of the key players of your team. Again, should you have multiple people involved in the project. You don't have a lot of room, 150 words or less for each member. And that's a pretty standard bio length. So it's good to have like your 150 words or less bio just on hand anyway. For each of the individuals that's included, we're going to want to know their affiliation to Mason. So what year they graduated, what school they graduated from, but also, and this is one that a lot of people forget to put in, what their role is in your proposed project. So, someone might be like, they might make their bread and butter as a videographer, but their role in this film project is as a director. And so that's going to be important for the panelists to know as they're looking, for feasibility, as they're looking for artistic excellence. They're going to want to know who's doing what in this project. But this is a pretty self-explanatory one. And again, you don't have to put everyone in there. I think of it as who's going to be making the artistic decisions, or kind of like the major production decisions. And that's who we want to know is involved. Ryan?
Yeah, I echo all of that. And as I said earlier, just be sure to use less adjectives as possible, and amp it up with credentials. And so, question, Adrian, is there any weight placed upon creative teams that have ample Mason representation? Is that, I know it's not stated in the guidelines, but is that ever?
No, I'm really glad that you brought that up. Not necessarily.
Okay.
No, it's wonderful if we can, the more Mason alums, the better. But, I think we're really focused on the project itself. I think the argument, and I can't get into the mind of each of the panelists, right? So like every panelist is going to review every application differently. But that is not something that we tell them, for example, is to say like, oh, if this involves 5 people, then that automatically bump that up. But that's a great question. Okay. So as you look at the online application, these are the 2 things that you are going to submit online on the spot. I think it's important to note, this is the first time we've had our application online. One thing that I am disappointed about, but we're limited by, what Mason, what we can do with our web presence, is that you can't save the application online. So I would suggest having your answers ready to go, typed out, edited, etc., so that you're doing this in one fell swoop, as opposed to trying to type a little bit and then come back at a later time to submit it. So that is one flaw that unfortunately we can't fix just yet. So we'll see how it goes. And then there are additional supplemental documents. These will be emailed to Haley. They are due at the same time as the online application, which is Friday, February 5th at 11:59 Eastern time. Please, please, please do not wait until 11:50 Eastern time to try to upload, to send Haley an email or to upload your documents. I have done that many times, and it's not a good practice to have, and it will at some point not work in your favor. So I highly advise you build an internal deadline to try to get that submitted at least the day before. That way, if you have any questions, if there's any technological issues, you're not stressing when you're trying to submit this application. Yes, there's Haley's email. So the supplemental documents are two things. We have first the work samples, and then we have the budget. So for the work samples, we ask everyone to submit 2 work samples in a medium that makes sense for your project. So if you're applying to produce a short film, we're going to want to see, a video of your past work, or perhaps a script. Your work sample can be exemplary of your past work, or it could have to do with the current project that you're applying for. But 2 work samples for every individual. We ask for you to put this information on one PDF that is emailed to Haley. We would love to have recent work if possible. If you are 25 when you're applying for this, we'd prefer not to see, what have, not the end of the world, but it will behoove your project to make it as recent as possible. Again, COVID is, I think for many people has meant that the last, maybe you haven't been able to do as much depending on your discipline. So, we're understandable about that. But For, let's see, if you are submitting video or music, submitting links to online versions is definitely preferable, as opposed, well, yeah, we don't want to be receiving video files that are, 10 gigabytes. We want to have a link to be able to access it online. And if that needs to be password protected, we just want to make sure that you are communicating that in your PDF, so that you're not making the panelists scramble to try to figure out how to view your work. If you're submitting video or audio, each panelist will look at each applicant, will look at up to 10 minutes of work total per applicant. So that could be an 8-minute work sample and a 2-minute work sample, a 5 and 5. And it doesn't have to be 10 minutes, but that's the max that they will review. So it can be an excerpt if you want to submit an evening length work that you have created, but you only want them to look at one 5-minute piece, that's fine. Please just indicate the time code when you submit that PDF. One thing that we have noticed is, in the past when individuals have submitted sheet music or scripts, often that, makes sense for whatever your project is. But again, going back to remembering who your audience is, your game design, panelists might not know how to read a score. It might be a little bit more difficult for, a dance professor to really be able to read a script and understand how that's going to come to life. I mean, these are just generalizations and examples, but so we do ask that if you're going to submit sheet music, if you're going to submit a script, please have the other work sample be some sort of either audio or visual file. For each of your 2 work samples, we want you to include some information that kind of puts it in panelist knows what they're looking at and knows why you chose this specific example. So this is outlined here, but we're looking for creation year. Again, we want to know, is this something that you did last year or something that you did 15 years ago? The creative team, we're not looking for full bios. We're just looking for, if you're showing a video of a quartet, who are the players? We'd like to know, who is involved. Brief description of the work sample and how it relates. This way we know, are they showing us a project that they have done, which will be very similar in style or scope to what the application is for? Or is this, a work in progress of the project that you're applying for? So again, just a brief, couple of sentences description. Time code, if applicable, again, that's if you're going to send a larger work and you only want them to review one part of it. And again, password. Any question on work samples? There's no specific format for the PDF that you send to Haley. You essentially can just create a Word document that has all of this typed out and then save it as a PDF and send it to Haley. Okay. We'll launch into budget, always everyone's favorite part of any grant application. So again, if you're looking at the online form, there is a budget template for you to download. This is very much a template. Everyone's project is going to be different. Everyone's project is going to need to have different line items. We understand that, so modify this template as necessary. Essentially, we're just using this as a way to kind of make the information delivered to our panelists in a little bit more of a cohesive, similar way, so it's easier for them to review. But please make this budget your own. So, this document really tells the financial story of your project, both in terms of income, in terms of expense, and a very important part of any budget for a grant application, which is the budget notes. If you download the template, you'll see this on the second tab of the template. And, you know, your budget template is an Excel spreadsheet. It can only tell you so much. So if you need to explain why you need to spend, you know, $3,000 on craft services, like why it's absolutely necessary, we're going to want to hear that in the budget. In the budget notes. And I think Ryan is going to talk about, you know, showing others your application before you submit it. I think a budget is a really important thing to show someone that isn't inside of your head, to say, what would you have questions about in terms of these expenses, or in terms of projected income, that I might need to go ahead and explain to someone else. And that's what goes in the budget notes section. Something else that can be included, we very much encourage you to pay individual as part of this project. We think artists should be paid for their work. I feel very strongly about that. And you should do a little bit of research, if you don't already know, about what industry standards are for, you know, your discipline. And the budget notes section is a great place to put that information. So, you know, I had 3 dancers. They were paid $25 an hour for 10-hour rehearsal period. You know, like, that's the budget notes section gives you a little bit of room to kind of go into that deeper explanation. Let's see, when you're conceptualizing your budget, and this is something that, again, we only have so much time, and oh my goodness, it's already 7:53. So we can follow up with individual questions that you might have. But the way that we see expenses related to your project is that you are really in charge of paying for the creation of the project, the rehearsal necessary beforehand, the film necessary to take the photographs, or you know, the craft services to feed your film crew. What Mason is going to take care of is the on-site production costs and the marketing costs for you. So with production, one example I like to think of is if you're doing a theater piece or a dance piece, and you have a lighting designer, you are in charge of paying for the lighting designer. We will pay for the lighting board operator that will run the board during the public presentation of your work. So again, there can be a lot of gray area here. So feel free to email us and we can try to help clarify that. Will the GMU event be a ticketed event? Totally depends. We do not have a requirement that it be a ticketed event. So, well, here's what I'll tell you. In COVID times, everything's a ticketed event because we can't have people that are just going to arrive on campus. But there is not necessarily going to be, you know, a paid ticket that's necessary for the event. That's a conversation that you have with Haley and with myself once we know a little bit more about your project. So. Let's see, what else I need to tell you. In terms of your contributed income, right? So with income, you have contributed income and earned income. Earned income is, you know, if you're selling something to try to raise money, you know, if you anticipate selling tickets, and contributed income is fundraising, is grants, is donations. We do ask that you include the $5,000 Young Alumni Commissioning Project grant in your budget. So assume that you will get 5,000, create your budget based on that. And then in your budget notes, explain how you would adjust your project if you were to only get 2,500, say. How would you scale it down if you were to only get 2,500? Which is a great exercise just to do in general. It's always good to know because you're almost never going to get of the full amount that you ask for when you're applying for grants. Quickly, I'll just keep going. If your project expenses exceed
$5,000. You just need to explain how you're going to make up the difference. Are you going to crowdfund? Are you going to do a Kickstarter? Are you going to apply for a foundation grant? Or is your mom going to pay for the rest? All of those are fine options, but let us know what your plan is. And you'll see a column for pending or confirmed. So we want to know, do you anticipate that you're going to get this additional income, or do you know for a fact that you're going to get this income? Don't just assume that you can use Mason resources. So don't just assume that because 5 years ago you were good friends with Murray, that he's going to let you use, rehearsal space for free. It might be that he will, but we do ask that you connect with the appropriate faculty or staff member to get their approval that if you are able to award this grant, that they would be able to provide you, either with that space or with that equipment, which we have absolutely had happen in the past. And we will do anything to support you in kind, but don't just assume that you're going to get that support, because you never know who's going to be on the panel. And they might be reading your application and saying, hey, wait a minute, I didn't promise any of this to this applicant. And finally, contingency. It's always good to have a budget line for contingency. There's always going to be something that you didn't think of. So you need to have a little bit of cushion built into your budget to account for that. It doesn't have to be a lot, but a little bit, I think, is a good practice. Ryan.
Yes.
Over to you.
Yes. So not much to add. When thinking about crafting your narrative, remember that all these pieces, the narrative, the project summary, the budget, the work sample, they all go together. So cross-check your budget and make sure that things that need to be mentioned in the narrative are mentioned in the narrative, the project summary, and vice versa. If you have an expense that you outline in the project summary, make sure it's in the budget. The income and expenses should be equal. The types of expenses you may have are tangible items, labor, software, and services, especially for visual arts alumni. And it's really important, the notes column is key. So be sure to calculate how you get to various expenses if they're not a flat rate. So for example, if you have an editor for an editor expense for $500, is that a flat? Maybe that is a flat rate. Or if it's not, if it's $10 or not $10, hopefully not $10 an hour. If it's $50 an hour for 10 hours, be sure to put that in the notes field.
Great. So just a final note or reminder, the application is 2 different parts. We have the online part, and then we have these 2 supplemental documents that have to be emailed to Haley. They're both due by Friday, February 5th at midnight. I know we have now reached 8 p.m. I know that Ryan has some additional information that he wanted to share, so we're going to keep going, and we're also happy to stay. I know we didn't get to some questions, Michaela, so we're happy to stay and answer some more questions, but of course, if you need to leave at 8 p.m., please feel free to do so and email Haley with any of your questions. So Ryan.
Yeah, so just some helpful exercises. So when we sit down at the computer and start typing, or at least for me, that's when the jargon starts coming out. So I found that if you explain your project to a friend, that's when you really get the spirit of it out and get the energy of it out and the excitement. So that's one thing that can really help you to sort of get a really clear, articulate idea of your project, is to just sit down and tell a friend what your project entails. And then the next exercise is go back to a different friend or same friend and ask them to read your proposal and ask them what they think of it in terms of clarity and any questions they have about the logistics of it and the flow of it. And then just some final resources, some books. There's a lot of great books out there on the market. The first one I recommend is The Only Grant Writing Book You'll Ever Need. That is general. It's not geared toward the arts, but it's a very concise one of the best on the market, in my opinion, but it's not the only grant writing book you'll ever need, because I recommend The Artist's Guide to Grant Writing by Gigi Rosenberg. That's geared toward the arts, obviously, but it's also really focuses heavily on individual artists. So that's one I would recommend. Some virtual training programs. GrantSpace is run by the Foundation Center, and that is an online platform that is a directory of grants, and you can search by all different variables, such as geographic location. Do the funders fund individuals? Do they fund certain art forms? It is a paid, Foundation Center is a paid subscription, but the public libraries usually offer it for free. But the Foundation Center's training entity is GrantSpace, and a lot of those programs that they offer are free, and they're broken down by art form. So they do one for individual artists, and that's grantspace.org. New York Foundation for the Arts, State Art Agency for New York State, that website is very comprehensive with so many resources. There's so much out there right now with COVID, and there's the Artist Release Fund, and so many great opportunities that have come out in the last year. So if you go to the New York Foundation for the Arts, that's going to help you navigate to some of these larger listservs. And same thing with Creative Capital. That's another one that I highly recommend for resources on grant writing and funding opportunities. Lastly, serving on a grant panel. That is the best education you will ever get in grant writing. And there was nothing that helped me more as a grant writer than when I served on it as a panelist for the DC Commission on the Arts and Humanities, which is the state art agency for the District of Columbia. I get emails quite a bit that they're seeking panelists. They have quite a few grant opportunities and are always looking for panelists. And because you have degrees in an art form from Mason, I suspect they will see you as qualified to participate. So their website is dcarts.dc.gov. So happy grant writing. Any questions?
Yeah. So I see we have a couple of questions. I will start off with Michaela. You asked a question about rights. That is such an amazing question, and it is a hot topic right now, especially as many people have transferred into the digital realm, which is a little bit uncharted territory. Many people, including us, are learning. So the answer is it depends. Well, sorry, the answer is yes. Rights are an expense that you would have to have covered. The nuance there is that if you are performing in our venue and it is a live performance with no digital component, so with no live stream or anything, we have blanket licenses with ASCAP and BMI and CSAC, which are the three major performing rights organizations that would cover your rights, assuming that your music is included in the repertory of, in the catalog, sorry, of those performing rights organizations. So yes, rights need to be in your budget line, and we are happy to work with you to offer some high-level guidance as you're doing your application about this. And if your application, is successful, we would work very closely to help you with that, because it can be a little bit overwhelming, the world of rights. In terms of the performance, do Mason supplies and stage space need to be included in the budget? So this goes back to if you are going to be performing in our venue, if you're going to be on the concert hall stage, if you're going to be in Harris Theater, no, that for the performance part of this, or for the public showing part of this, that is an expense that we will cover. So the question of rehearsal time, so the creation time, that is something that, if you think, oh, it would be great to use Harris Theater in the summertime because other people aren't using the space. We wouldn't charge you for that space, but again, we would need you to speak to the appropriate person to ensure that that's, okay. So you'd want to talk to someone in the School of Dance and say, do you think that I, theoretically would be able to use this studio? And then let's see, your next question is, if my dance was 20 to 30 minutes and I wanted to create a longer performance, can I add another dance that hasn't been performed due to the shutdown, or invite other choreographers to have a dance of theirs? So the question is, if you already have a dance that existed before COVID, so it was already created, and are you looking to potentially use the funds to make a like an evening of work? I think that that is what you're asking. And the answer is yes, that would certainly be considered. You would just need to make sure that it was clear in the project budget what your expenses are for the creation of that new work, as well as, you know, paying any artists for the performance, etc. But that would certainly be considered. Allah has a question about collaboration. Two Mason alum, both co-creators. How can this be approached in the application? Sure. So you can explain it in your project summary. You can also outline that in the creative team bios, that you're, you know, equal co-creators. We ask that you have one individual submit the application just for simplicity's sake. But, you know, that is, you can still absolutely apply if you are an equal collaborator with someone else. It just makes it a little bit easier to kind of process the application. And in fact, our first winner of the Young Alumni Commissioning Award 2 years ago was a team of 3 Mason alums that were all kind of equally involved, had equal input, but it was just one person that submitted the application. Let me know if does that answer your question? Okay, great. Any other questions we can answer here? All right, well, again, we are here. I'm sure you'll probably think of more questions. Please, you know, reach out to Haley. She'll either be able to answer your question or connect you with the appropriate person that could. And thanks for tuning in. Really looking forward to reading your proposals. It's great to have you all. So, and I hope all is going well. I know it's been a hard year for everyone, and for the arts in particular. So we're thinking about our alums, and we hope that this is a helpful opportunity. Thanks, Ryan, for joining me.
Thank you. Best of luck, everyone.
All right, and thanks, Haley, for organizing. Bye all.